day to my Stadio lecturers and assessors. I am Marilynn Naidoo, and in this video I will be expounding on my informal lesson as a part of task 1 for alternative teaching practice. And in it I will be doing my lesson rationale, my intro, and my development of the informal lesson. And the informal lesson that I have chosen is a lesson for natural science and technology. It falls part of the technology section, and the topic of my lesson is systems, wheels and axles. Natural science and technology is my specialization subject, so I am all for expounding on it into the greater details of what it takes to create and to be a part of a lesson that is successful both for me, the teacher, and for the learners. So obviously it's the element of being enjoyable and teaching something that will last forever or for a long time. And in this particular lesson, there's 2 strategies that I've used throughout. And the first one is oral science conversation. So in this instant, it would be oral technological conversation, which also falls part of science. And the second strategy that I used is the construction of models, so making models. And these are the 2 elements that are the basis of my entire lesson. My lesson begins with a discussion. It goes into the development of the lesson by discussion, and discussion is carried out throughout my lesson. It is an important part of my lesson because I not only want to give and dispense a certain important information regarding wheels and axles, which forms a part of a kind of a type of system, but I also want to cement their knowledge on it. My lesson begins with a discussion. A discussion moves the lesson from the introduction into the development, and it is further sustained all through the process of telling the learners how to go about making their models. And it is also a means of how I consolidate the lesson. So the discussion and the oral discussion is a very big part of my lesson. I do believe that it serves a great function, and that is to see what kind of information the learners already have, their prior knowledge, together with the experience of the subject matter. And with this being said, it also allows me to extract information and clues about where the lesson should be headed. So if I had to find a learner who has an idea of what a system is, but has not been introduced to wheels and axles, but he has obviously encountered cars and rode in cars, and he knows what a trolley looks like and what a pram looks like, and he has this idea of wheels, and he obviously experienced it, but now getting to see it in terms of a system, and more intricately that specific name of the system, wheels and axles. So I do understand that there is a broad and there's a variety of learners in my classroom, and that is why it's important for me to conduct this type of strategy and to sustain the strategy from the word go, from the lesson introduction into the lesson development and into the lesson consolidation, because at each point I am presented with more knowledge. At the lesson introduction, when I pose a certain question and a certain scenario to the learners, they are able to tell me openly and honestly their raw understanding of the system that I obviously ask them. And the question, which will be discussed later on, is something that will give me a clue as to where their knowledge lies and where I can find gaps in that knowledge, and more importantly, how I can take a step to further fill in those gaps and fill in the knowledge that is missing, not just for the greater whole, but more importantly for this lesson. The objectives are fairly simple, and one of the main objectives of the lesson is to make the learners understand so that they can state in their own words what a system is, why a wheel and axle falls a part of the system, and for their own using and for their own enrichment in their lives is to understand and to find out, why do I need to know the system? Are there systems around me? And this wheel and axle system that this lesson is all about, is it in my life? Is it a part of my reality? And if so, if it is, I now know that I can relate it to a system, and I know what it is called, and I know what it is made of. I know this information. So that is why I will conduct this oral discussion throughout my lesson, because it's important for me to get feedback at the different stages of my lesson and to find out where the learners are at, where certain group of learners are at, where individual learners are at, and most importantly, how I can guide the lesson, how I can choose my words and choose my questions, choose my referral to certain parts of the lesson to develop the learner's understanding on the topic altogether. In conjunction with my oral science discussion, I have used the other strategy that I mentioned at the beginning, which is the use of models. And when I talk about models, it is an important part of any science lesson. If you ask any science teacher, that's what they'll tell you, because in my second year of teaching practice, there was a science lesson that I conducted, and the teacher was very clear to point out the importance of experiments, of models, of giving the learners an understanding on, and these are representations of the theory that is behind it. So when the learners have something real, something tangible, something to work with, something to use, something to relate it to a greater part of reality and relate it with the theory behind it, then this further develops their knowledge, further develops their understanding on the subject altogether. And I have used the construction of the rover or a buggy, and it's a very, very easy to make model. And the method that I've chosen to do this is by group work. And this is purposed so because the construction is so simple. I want to engage the learners in discussion, in finding ways to make it work faster, finding ways to make it look better, because of its simple construction, its simple tools that we're going to use. It is nothing that's challenging or difficult. So basically, I want to see how they work with each other in developing something, in making something, and in understanding a part of the model making. Before they make the model, they have to read together an extract about NASA's rovers and how rovers sort of look like buggies. So buggies and rovers, they look alike. And the whole idea behind this is just linking it further into how this lesson is a part of their reality. And that is why I've chosen that reading for this particular part of the lesson. So when they work in groups, I want to accomplish the simple objectives of group work, and that is the ability to dispense knowledge between their peers, the ability to extracts knowledge, the ability to say that this works, this does not work. How do you know? I've done it before. How do you not know? Maybe we can try it out now and see what happens. So it's all about engagement, communication, being able to work together as a team, being able to see the relationship between the reading and the wheel and the system, and how it all falls together and why it makes sense and why we are reading this. And that is why I've chosen this as the second strategy, because it is a science lesson, and science lesson is better when we have a model or a representation to cement the learner's understanding of it. And the group work is purposed for them to engage in discussion with each other. So the oral discussion was the big discussion that was taking place in the classroom, and then we have the groupings and the different types of people and learners that will come together, that will sit down and look at the task ahead of them and make decisions about who's doing what, who's cutting, who's putting together, who's assembling, who's going to read the story to us. Are we going to read it separately? And why do we need the story? Ma'am did say that there is a relationship between the story and the system. So these are my two teaching strategies that I have used, and just to repeat them, it's the oral science discussion and the use of models. And this is very important, not just for this lesson, but also for science lessons altogether. Good morning, boys and girls. Today for our lesson, I want you to think about a car. Has anyone not seen a car here? Everybody has seen a car. Has everyone been in a car before? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Who uses transport to come to school? One, two, quite a few of you. Who walks to school? Okay. So you, on your way to school, you must have seen cars on the road, and those of you who are coming by transport have sat in cars to get here today. So I want you to put in your mind a picture of any car. You can think about the car you come as with your transport. It could be an Avanza or a Toyota Corolla, whatever car you want to think of. Or you could even think about your mom's car or your dad's car or your dream car, whatever car you want to think about. Think about a car, because most cars, even though they look differently, they have more or less the same features. They have wheels, they have a body and windows, they have a windscreen at the front, at the back, they have mirrors. There's certain things that looks the same in all cars, right? So now I want you, now that you have this picture of a car in your mind, let's look at how many wheels do cars have. 4, that's correct. So all cars that we're considering, they have 4 wheels. What is the shape of these 4 wheels? They're circles, they're round. Okay, have you been in a car that has a square wheel or a pentagon wheel, an irregular pentagon wheel? No, so they're all round. We do agree that it has 4 wheels, this car that you're thinking about, and the wheels are round. Okay, and it is this that allows the car to move. Okay, so now with that being said, I want to ask you, there's 4 wheels, and these 4 wheels in our car, they help the car to move. They are responsible in moving the car. When the car is on, it is powered by the engine and the steering wheel to move. And if the car is off, you can push it. You gotta just put the handbrake down and you can push it, but it is not the body or the the windows or the window wipers or any other part, it is the wheels that are concerned and that are responsible for making the car move. Yes. Okay, so now I want to know, these wheels, how do they all know that they need to turn this side, or they need to turn that side, or they need to go straight? Anybody has some answers? Maybe your dad is a mechanic, or you've been around in automobile shops and you know all about cars. So here's your chance to tell us about what you know about cars. Why? How do the wheels know? How do the wheels know that they need to turn together, or that they need to turn at all? Anybody? Okay, it's powered by the steering. The steering makes it turn. But what links it to the steering? Is it just magic? The car just senses it needs to turn this way, so we're going to turn this way. What is it? Really? What is it? Okay, so maybe I'm going to leave it at that for now. We'll come back to this question soon enough. I know some of you already have ideas, but a bit shy maybe to say it because you're afraid of being wrong, but you shouldn't be afraid because it's an open circle and we're here to learn. Okay, so I want you to look on your worksheets. Everybody has gotten their worksheets. I want you to look at the picture that's on top of your worksheet. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Just stare at that picture. And when you're staring at that picture, think about the question I asked you. Remember, we thought about a car. It has 4 wheels. The wheels are round. And these wheels are responsible for making our car move. And now I asked you, how does the wheels know to move together? That is what I want you to think about when you're looking at that picture on your worksheets. Reading we're going to learn a special word here. So it says the most important part of any of the mechanisms in a vehicle. So the mechanisms is a word that refers to the single parts in a system, and a system is made up of many parts that work together to carry out a function. So in our vehicles, the most important system of mechanisms in a vehicle are the wheels and the axles. So we already know, if we look at our worksheet, we already know what our wheels are. It's the round objects that are on the ends, according to the picture, and that rod, that stick that's in the middle. What do you think that is called after you've read that part of the worksheet? It is your axle. So the axle is a rod that lies in between the wheels, and it's attached to the wheels, and the part that it is attached at is called a fulcrum. It's the part where the wheel turns at. So we have the wheel, we have the axle, and on that we have the fulcrum, and the fulcrum is where our axle goes through and where our axle turns. I want to know, what did you learn from reading that extract about rovers, Mars rovers? What is Mars, first of all? It's a planet. Good. And what's a rover? Okay, it says it's a thing that's getting sent to Mars. Okay, and why are these rovers important? Because they are made by scientists from NASA, and these rovers are sent to Mars to gather information about the planet, what it's like, what air do they have, what rivers do they have, can people live there, and so on and so forth. And so far they've sent out 4 rovers, and each of these rovers have specifications and characteristics and special names, and that's what the worksheet describes. So with that being said, these rovers are going to need to move. Yes, so they must have some type of, very good, they must have some type of wheel and axle that allows them to move. So what is the wheel and axle? Since we've read about it, we have done a problem about considering a car and how the wheels must know to turn, when and how. And we've done the rover reading. We've even made a model of our buggy or rover, which consisted of us making wheels and axles. So now, what is the wheel and the axle system? Okay, first, what makes it a system? Because it is made up of many parts. That's correct. And how many parts specifically is this system made up of? 2, the wheel and the axle, correct? And it's also a system because these parts work together to perform or to carry out a function. Like, remember when we said the dustpan and the broom, and we also said the bicycle, and somebody said the TV set, and then we spoke about our car, which was the big reference for us in our example. It was the big example for us. It was the system, and we said it has many parts that works together, and these parts that work together carry out a specific job. They do something. Our TV set plays movies. Our car transports us from place to place. The broom in the pan clears out dirt, and the bicycle, just like the car, also transports us to places. But the bicycle is powered by pedaling, and the car is powered by your fuel and your engine. Okay, so what is the wheel and the axle? Okay, all right, so you say it's a system. Very good. So the wheel and the axle is a system, and it consists of 2 parts. And anyone want to add anything? Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Okay, what are the mechanisms that make up the wheel and axle system? So we said mechanisms is a word that tells us about the different parts that it is made up. So in our wheel and axle system, there are parts. What are the mechanisms that make it up? It's just building upon the other question. You already know the answer. 1 is your wheel, very good. 2 is your axle, very good, very good. And there's one more that come to now. So in your systems, everybody has their systems. Since you're still sitting in your groups, look at the models that you have created, okay? And I want you, if you can, raise your model up and point. You don't have to destroy your model. It may be very fragile because it's still drying or something. Point to the fulcrum that lies in your model. Very good. Very good. Okay, I see, but getting there. So in order to point to it, we need to know what it is. What is it? What is the fulcrum? Is it on our wheel or on our axle? It's on our wheel, and it's in our skewers and our pencils went into a point, and that point is the fulcrum. So the fulcrum is in the middle. Now, why do you think it's in the middle? Very good. It'd be much nicer for the wheels to turn, because if you put it right at the end, it's going to go right down and then it's going to pick right up, right down. It's going to give you a bumpy ride. But if you put it in the middle, it's going to move evenly and smoothly. All right. What is the purpose of the fulcrum? Anybody? Very good. To hold the system together, to hold the different mechanisms of the wheel and axle system together. And very good, very important point. It is the point at which it turns. So it's the main point, the center that causes it to turn, and more importantly, to turn smoothly. Because we said if you put it in the corner, it'll be very bumpy, it'll be very uncomfortable to ride in a car who has a fulcrum at the corner. So that's why it's at the middle. Okay, and it also holds if you since you've made your models, you know that if your fulcrum was loose, your car was wobbly. But if your fulcrum was tight, your car and your buggies and rovers, they moved quite nicely. Okay, very good. Okay, so our last question from the board there is, what if we did not have an axle? How would the wheels turn together at the same time? So remember that the whole wheel and axle, they are a system. And we cannot have a wheel and axle system without the wheel or the axle. So now I'm saying, in this system, if we had to take out the axle, how would our wheels turn together? It will definitely be a problem, am I right? If I ask you, what is the fulcrum? Is it on our wheel or on our axle? It's on our wheel, and it's in our skewers and our pencils went into a point, and that point is the fulcrum. So the fulcrum is in the middle. Now why do you think it's in the middle? Very good. It'd be much nicer for the wheels to turn, because if you put it right at the end, it's going to go right down and then it's going to pick right up, right down. It's going to give you a bumpy ride. But if you put it in the middle, it's going to move evenly and smoothly. All right, what is the purpose of the fulcrum? Anybody? Very good. To hold the system together, to hold the different mechanisms of the wheel and axle system together. And very good, very important point. It is the point at which it turns. So it's the main point, the center that causes it to turn, and more importantly, to turn smoothly. Because we said if you put it in the corner, it'll be very bumpy, it'll be very uncomfortable to ride in a car who has a fulcrum at the corner. So that's why it's at the middle. Okay, and it also holds if you since you've made your models, you know that if your fulcrum was loose, your car was wobbly. But if your fulcrum was tight, your car and your buggies and rovers, they moved quite nicely. Okay, very good. Okay, so our last question from the board there is, what if we did not have an axle? How would the wheels turn together at the same time? So remember that the whole wheel and axle, they are a system. And we cannot have a wheel and axle system without the wheel or the axle. So now I'm saying, in this system, if we had to take out the axle, how would our wheels turn together? It will definitely be a problem, am I right? If I ask you to make coffee, but I say don't use coffee, that is a problem. If I ask you to make me some cheese toast, but don't use bread, you're going to find alternatives, right? But it's the basic. You want your bread on your cheese because that forms the cheese toast, and your coffee is needed to make coffee. So just like that, if we don't have our axle, we have a very important member of our system missing. So we can't call it the wheel and axle system anymore because it has that part out. So only together, with your wheel and with your axle, do you have a complete system, this system. Everybody understands? Did you have fun making your models? Would you like to make some more? Okay, so we're going to round off this lesson, and there's an activity for you in your textbook, and you're just going to answer those questions very nicely. Don't forget to take those questions down, and we've already discussed the answers. Okay, so what we've learned today about the wheel and the axle, and that is a type of system. Very good. Thank you very much, boys and girls.